Am I black enough for you? That's Schoolie D. Hannah was scratching her head like, what is that? Am I black enough for you? I forgot what was the origin of the soundtrack. But what does it mean to be a black man in America? Ah, boy. To joining us to have this conversation is Charles Ellison, an award-winning thought leader and strategist and host at WURD. Mr. Ellison, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you all doing this morning? Good morning.
Good morning. Great. Fantastic. Mm-hmm. That's a big question. I'm like pondering the question, as I'm speaking, I'm listening to myself, my internal voice. And, I've said this 100 times and it's appropriate in so many various settings, but I'm like Du Bois, he sort of laid it out for us. And like, we're still struggling as black men. This is my interpretation of it,
Right.
And it's the duality, he told us, it's like, how do I reconcile myself? On the one hand, a black man, on the one hand, an African, and then on the other hand, as a black man. And for me, that's the struggle. It's the reconciliation of those two things.
It is. And that's changed. That perception of black maleness, of being a black man, has changed. It's evolved in a number of ways over the years, over the past century, since Du Bois made that statement, made that assessment. I mean, it definitely is quintessential struggle defined, right? Being a black man in America, and it's very multi-layered. It's all layers of onions that you have to peel. And it's very complex. In fact, it is you can make the argument, you can successfully make the argument that it is the most complex existence in America today. It's the most complex existence on the planet today, being a black man, because black men have, from the very start, particularly over the last several hundred years, black men have been the primary target of white supremacy, of white nationalism, of that entire doctrine, which is caked in or justified by religiosity, by even like bad and evil biblical interpretations, right? And so it's the whole notion of, with white supremacy, in order to dominate a group of people, you go for its men first. You look for ways to incapacitate its men, to make its men completely impotent, to take away the man's ability to defend his family, to defend his community. And so that's been what's been going on. That kind of struggle has been going on systematically for hundreds of years, right? To date. And we even see with those very horrific scenes of lynching that took place, particularly during after Reconstruction, during Jim Crow South, during segregation or legal segregation, that is. One of the first things that they went for when they were lynching black men, they went for black men's genitals. And so, there's that symbolism in there about taking, ripping the manhood away from black men. So that struggle still goes on to this day. And it is even more dire. It is even more urgent than we've ever seen it before.
Mm-hmm. How are we doing in this struggle? And then how do we parse out the parts,
Right.
Yeah.
We're not doing good. We're not doing so well at all. I mean, it's a struggle, but it's also mixed in with the hope that we'll get to the other side of this ongoing apocalypse and then, and witness and experience the glory and finally the optimism that comes with, finally just getting through this kind of struggle. But right now, I mean, as it stands, it's not good at all. Even after going through this big sort of social justice movement, since the death of George Floyd, and George Floyd's death, that visual was emblematic of the state that black men are in, with society constantly having its knee on our necks, on our collective necks. And so, but it hasn't gotten better. I mean, it's just a lot of symbolism that's being thrown about, a lot of protestations about Black Lives Matter, but, there's nothing behind it. There's no investments made behind it until we get into not just the conversation, but actual planning and execution about, okay, well, what are we doing about high black male unemployment? I understand there's a pandemic right now, budgets are slim, but money's still out there circulating. There's still things that have to be done, jobs that need to be filled. So, okay, well, let's talk about a much more like micro-targeted program of getting black men employed, of, what are investments that we can make in terms of black men and their education, or the education of black boys. What sorts of conversations or what sorts of planning and implementation are we having about that? Financial literacy, civic literacy, eco-literacy, ensuring that we finally break and completely dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline. Are we having planning discussions or sessions, school district by school district, about how we dramatically reduce or eliminate the disproportionate suspension and expulsion of black boys in K through 12? No, we're not having that conversation. So every other conversation, where we're talking about, how we want to feel better about black men or have a better conversation about black, that's tangential at the moment. That's irrelevant unless there is an institutional effort that's taking place right now on all levels, in terms of the government, city, state, federal, public sector, private sector, about like actually making those kinds of hard, tangible investments in black men. We're not seeing that happening right now. So, there's higher unemployment for everyone, but it's the highest for black men. Okay, well, what are we doing about that? We see the data points. I talk about that on my show on Reality Check on WURD all the time. We see the data. We've got more data points. We've got more data streaming before our very eyes than we have ever had in human history. We now can see problems much better than we ever have. But not those problems. We're just having conversations on constant loop on social media and creating a hashtag around it. Okay, that's great. We have awareness, but what are we doing about it? What's the plan?
Yeah, I'm overwhelmed just from the, you just threw it all out on the table, right? In the way that you just like, we have this issue, economics, unemployment, incarceration, system, racism, systemic racism, right? It's like we're so inundated by the questions we can't get to the answer, like the solution. Right. And so and that's also part of the challenge. And then I asked the question, I'm like, how do we parse this out? Because I don't think you can eat an elephant whole. And I think we're trying to eat an elephant whole, but we still have to take the elephant down. So we got to talk about that, but then we have to decide how. And then I understand economics, like 101. It's like supply and demand. Like, we have limited resources and unlimited wants.
Right.
So that we kind of sort of got to choose, but we understand that everything is interrelated. And that's the challenge of the black man, right? So
it is. It is.
And it's also the challenge of the woman. That you sparked something in my head too. I always say we can't reconcile ourselves as men until we resolve our issue with our woman. Because I think then that's an indication of our evolution as men. Right?
Right. Exactly.
So let's solve this. You and I can do it. You're brilliant. You're brilliant enough to solve this in 30 minutes. What does it mean to be a black man in America? Good Lord. We have on the line with us Mr. Charles Ellison, an award-winning thought leader, author, strategist, and host at WURD. Sir, welcome back. Thank you.
Be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So, how do we get past? How do we begin to move past, the pain of our origin in America, which is slavery? Mm-hmm. It seems to have such a strong hold on us, and we understand it's systemic. It goes all the way back to when, right?
Right.
So now what? So we got that.
Right. Yeah, we've been engaged in a lot of problem identification, so now we got to get into problem resolution, and a lot of that comes with planning, and when we have conversations, making sure that we add context to the conversation. So, for example, you were mentioning before the break, like the ongoing tensions between black men and black women. We can't have those conversations about our relationships unless we're contextualizing them, unless we understand or unless we inject the context of the the social, economic, cultural, political challenges that we've gone through over the past several hundred years, to understand that the state of our relationships right now, or the tension that's in our relationships, by and large, Black men and women, Black, male and female relationships are still ongoing. But they're still very troubled. We understand that, but we have to have like a multi-layered conversation first. And we have to understand, hey, listen, there are reasons, based in, our, the way that this society has systemically treated us that have brought us to this point. Yeah. But, when I brought it, definitely we're trying to unpack this in just, a moment. That's minutes when we really need hours and days to discuss it. But in a nutshell, it's just, as the saying goes, you fail to plan and you plan to fail. And right. So I think this is going to have to happen on two tracks. One track, or one parallel track, is making sure that we're constantly putting the pressures on those public sector, private sector institutions, because we are here where we live in this society. So, we have to maximize or leverage as much as possible those opportunities in government, in the private sector, in the nonprofit sector, putting pressure on those institutions to meet our demands and to deliver. So that's happening on one track, and that includes, for example, mobilizing, maximizing Black male, since we're talking about Black men, Black male leadership and turnout in this election. That's non-negotiable. But so every Black man that's eligible has to turn out and vote, because and not just vote, but then we have to look for creative opportunities for Black men, for young Black men especially, to lead in a situation like this. So so that's kind of like on that one track. But then on another track, another parallel track, it's us as a community. We know what society is doing, and we know what white people are going to do. White people are going to do what white people do. That's their thing, right? But then we have to ask ourselves, well, what are we doing? So what are we doing on the micro level in our communities? What sorts of contributions are we making as individuals? What sorts of talent or skill sets do we have as individuals, as households, as families that can contribute to the greater Black good in our communities? And so how are we operationalizing those talents and those skill sets towards a better good, towards a better outcome for our communities? Because we talk on days, for example, about the things that white folks do and about the things that Trump do, but I'm tired of having those conversations. I want to, because the way we need to resolve those conversations is we need to, all eligible folks who are of age, get registered and get out to vote, and also get activated and mobilized and really truly dominate that political landscape.
Let me put this on the table, though, Mr. Ellison. I'm with you. I am. Right. But I'm saying this straight up. Most Black men that I glean, we're not even in a position to process the problem. So let alone get to the answer or the solution. Right. Right. Like it seems like so many Black men are broken and fractured and bothered. Like, so what does it matter what the resources are if we are not sourced in self? So no matter how much in terms of resources you throw at us, quote unquote, as Black men, because as an economy, we're 1.3 trillion or more in America. But yet and still, we're still, like if you stripped away the remnants and the riches of white America, we'd be operating on the level of a third world country. Right. Hold on. A third world country at war with self. So there has to be some explanation to that. So for me, that's the context in which we exist in, and what the cause of that is something else. But now we have to get to resolution at some point, right? So how do we clear the space? If this is like a therapy session as a Black man, what would you tell a Black man to help him clear his space?
Yeah, first we have to ask ourselves, who sent us the memo that the ancestors wrote down somewhere that we should punk out of a fight, because, no one said that this was going to be easy. Yeah. And we know that this is going to be an ongoing, enduring fight. But our history as a people, and that's where the history component comes in, And that's why that's important, especially, since we're Black boys and school K through 12, like that mandatory Black history, and knowing that history even before we stepped on the shores. But, we've never stepped out of a fight. We've always risen to that occasion. So that's one, kind of like, we need to.
Number one, you're a fighter. Number one, you're a warrior. Number one, we need to remind you of who you are. Right. Let's start right there.
Right.
Okay.
Right. We are warriors. We've always been warriors. That history was before we can, because there's this assumption that Black folks just kind of like rose from mud on the shores of Virginia in 1619. We come from these very sophisticated, complex, advanced civilizations.
I have to get going. The lines are burning up. And, you said something we're great at. We've done a good job, if you will, of identifying the problems, but not problem planning. And so I'm trying to move on to the problem planning of things. I understand the necessity to talk about the problem. I got it. But I'm I'm so tired of talking about what the problem is without moving forward to the planning and the strategy of things.
Right.
And we have to this is just my humble opinion. Like, we must clear the space for these Black men. So many of me too. Let's start with me. I'm a quote unquote high performing Black man, right?
Right.
By anyone's standard, I'm doing fantastic. But I'll tell you, man, I have to get up and struggle and talk myself down off cliffs. I got to work through all types of, anxiety, thoughts, limitations, preconceived notions about self, whatever the source may be, for me to just do what I do.
See, that's the first big step right there, right? Is like whatever we do has to be trauma informed. And so really, I think the first big major step, is, collectively for Black men, especially, I mean, this is for Black people in general, but since we're on the topic of Black men, we need a massive mental health Marshall Plan, so to speak. We Black men, I mean, this is where our communities, all those civic organizations, community groups, Black churches, really, there are organizations of collective consortium organizations of Black psychiatrists and Black therapists who can, and nonprofit organizations that have popped up that are supposed to be, looking for ways to provide mental health services for Black men. So Black men, first and foremost, need a big, massive, nationwide mental health check.
Now we're talking.
This is what we need. And that has to be intentional. That has to be deliberate. That has to be something that's scaled up. Where Black men, doesn't matter where you are on the income strata, you are being placed into some kind of mental health regimen, or you are getting connected with a therapist, preferably a Black therapist, and you're unpacking the trauma that you've gone through as a Black man. That's something that has to happen on an operational basis. I'm not talking conceptual. Correct. It has to be operational.
Yeah, now that's now reparation. Reparations, that one right there. Ordinance, that one right there, politicians. Let's start right there. Let's go to Eddie Reed because we missed him on the last go round, and then Tommy. How are you, sir?
Brother, I'm going to be very quick. Very quickly. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
All right. Listen, respectfully, Black men don't need to go to mental health. What Black men need is to see this white man punished for all of his damage to us as men to us as people. What Black men need to do is to go to court and file charges. In the last conversation, this brother, I love Brandon Johnson, but he's talking about preparing the chicken. He ain't talking about killing the fox. We men see and know when you are castrated and you are held back from being able to be your true self. When you look at this country, the white man in charge of this country has made it to where if you don't sit down, boy, you're going to be castrated. If you don't sit down, boy, we'll put our knee on your neck. If you don't sit down, boy, we will take you and kill you. And so what's happening right now is Black men need to come together in a room privately, put an agenda together that's in the interest of our Blackness and our people, and then roll on it.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, sir.
Eddie makes a good point, but, that's where we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. I think what we're proposing here is not an either or, it's a both and. And so, once again, going back to that parallel track strategy that I was talking about, Eddie's absolutely right. I mean, that's part of, putting more pressure on those institutional mechanisms, on that system that's been oppressing us for so many years, that's been putting us in the position that we're in, continuing that fight. But on another track, you're going to need immediate mental health help. You're going to need a mental health framework, because you got to be in the right state. We've all got to be in the right state of mind to be able to do this effectively and collectively. Because there's a whole bunch of issues internally within our own communities that we got to sort out.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So we're fighting a two-front war. I mean, we've got one front. It's like we're in the middle of World War II. You got Pacific theater and Western theater, and so one theater, we're fighting against white people and their constant aggressions, the microaggressions. But on another front, we're fighting a lot of struggles internally within our own selves. I mean, we're dealing with, for example, violence. Or other issues within our own communities, and so we've got to sort that out. And that's all that is all connected in some way, or in a variety of ways, to systemic racism. But at the end of the day, we still need to sort those things out as a community, and that's that mental health checkup that I was talking about earlier on.
Let's go to line one. Tommy's been waiting for some time. Tommy, how are you,
well,
sir?
First of all, let me say good morning to you, Attorney Fenton, and Charles, man. I have nothing but the utmost affection for you. But to be a black man in America is to wake up and recognize that the cards are stacked against you, that you have been counted out. But people died to give you an opportunity to be one of the most dynamic individuals that could ever be created on the face of the earth. To be a black man in America is to recognize and understand that your history tells you that you are somebody. To be a black man in America is to know that there is a wide road of destruction and a narrow road called salvation. To be a black man in America is to understand that your achievement empowers and opens up a narrative to those who think that they can't, to know that they can. To be a black man in America is to know that you've had some of the greatest individuals walking around on the face of the earth that were all black: inventors, scientists, doctors, lawyers, teachers. And the last point on being a black man in America is when you do these things, that you may come from a situation that's horrific, but that's not where you end up at. That might be where you began at. And then you'll find yourself in a room where someone will teach you how to be OJ-proof, and another individual will give you the intellectual prowess to stand up and say, hey, you know what? I've had a rough road. My name may not be in lights and stuff. I may not shoot a basketball or run down a field with a football or swing a bat for a baseball, sing, or rap. But I'll find myself a beautiful black woman and have a family, live and die, and they'll wake up and recognize and understand that a black man in America is somebody. Have a great day.
Thank you, sir. Very well said. Mr. Charles Ellison, what would you leave us with?
Once again, it's just making sure that we have a strategy for all of this. A large part of the problem is that we're in this very high communication, high digital society. And so it kind of fools us into thinking that these big hashtag conversations is the key to our success, or is the key to a better outcome. We need to get activated and mobilized and operationalized. We need to start looking at what the larger strategy and plan is and how we execute it. And so that goes back to, for example, but starting off, once again, understanding that we are in a state of trauma. We're in a state of public health trauma, economic trauma, also mental trauma. And so how do we address those? How do we take care of those so we can move forward as better people and as warriors so we can continue that fight?
Yeah. Thank you much, sir, for joining the show. And,
Thank you.
I'll be checking you out. Have a great day.
B. Fenton, we were having a conversation about what it means to be a black man in America. And once again, and I like that terminology Charles Ellison provided. He said, we're great at problem identification. We need to get to problem planning. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Surely is. Surely is. That mental health piece is critical. We have to work on our minds, our mental stability, because if we don't have the proper mindset and tap into our spirit and know who we are, whose we are, what we are, our history, it's almost an insurmountable mountain, and then we'll be constantly shifted by the whims of those who control the environments that we exist in, which is America. And I think that's part of the tragedy and the trauma that we exist in as Black men, not just slavery, the trauma from slavery that has been unresolved, not just the trauma from Jim Crow, but it's the current day trauma of knowing that we are operating at less than who we are. And I think, if I had to define, that's one way of defining it. It could be defined in many ways. Like, we just know that we're not operating optimally, not even respectfully. We're just so far under our possibility. And many of us don't know how to work our way through it because we weren't provided those tools. And no Black man wants to say that he feels less than a man. So a lot of men, they are men, they feel like men, but in certain aspects or regards to their lives, they don't feel like men. Like, it's hard to feel like a man when you can't provide in a way that you identify a man providing. It's hard to feel like a man and step in a room as a man, as a Black man, when you can't, quote unquote, protect your woman. That you can't give her the comfort that she desires for whatever reason. It's difficult, as a Black man. So many Black men have been divorced, not from their woman, but they've been divorced from their children. So it's like, this is modern day slavery. Children are being ripped, from the hands of Black men too. And we talk about, and I talk about it too. I do. I talk about Black men, quote unquote, leaving the home, but oftentimes, there's an emotional or psychological reason for his absence. It is. It's not an excuse. And no matter what may have caused the disconnect from the family, it's still a trauma that he has to deal with as a Black man. It's like, how do you resolve that? That's the conflict. So we've got a lot. And I said it previously. I'll say it again in case you missed it. What does it matter, the resources, if we don't have an awareness of the source? Without the source, then the resources are irrelevant. You can give us, we can have the money. We have money in our community, but there's still murder by Black men. These are not starving Black men. These are not men who have not eaten for days and they're out stealing for the sake of their family to feed their family. These are battered, bruised, broken Black men killing in our communities, not over sustenance. It's over broken spirits. Not an excuse, it's an observation. Well, I started the day with this. If you hadn't heard, I talked about seniors. I don't want you stressing yourself over money because many of you are judgment proof. Understand that. So if you have Social Security or a pension as your primary or only source of money, no one can take that money from you. You're exempted from the claims of creditors. Right? And if you have a home and you're married, then no one's like, there's no take your house police because you owe credit card debt. All right. So I need you all to relax and take care of yourself. And then we had the conversation about defunding the police and all that other good stuff and redirecting resources to our community, which is a great idea. But I'm just going to say to politicians, we need to learn how to better articulate and then bring the people along. Don't talk about saving the community if you don't have the community as part of the solution? Like, how do you even know? Like, the community should be walking lockstep with you. That's my diatribe. Before we get off the air, we've got to say, let's play the song. We got a happy birthday. Happy birthday, Barack Obama. Happy birthday, Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Happy birthday, Robin Robinson. And most important, happy birthday. I know Perry will sing happy birthday to Melody Span Cooper. Today is her birthday, most important today. So all these great people have birthdays today, people. So hey, if you see Melody, tell her, happy birthday, Melody. She keeps getting younger. Last time I saw Melody, I was mad at her. I was like, why is Melody looking so young? What's going on? I see Pierre, too, doing push-ups and sit-ups in his office. You all not leaving me behind, Melody. Nope. Happy birthday, Melody Span Cooper, President Barack Obama, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and Robin Robinson. All right, people, until next time, I say to thee, peace out.